drone weighs about 2 pounds, and it can lift roughly about 2 pounds, at least if you want any maneuverability and flight time. And it turns out that that roughly 1-to-1 ratio of payload to drone weight holds true even up to larger agriculture drones, sprayer drones, in the roughly 100-pound range. In fact, even if you look at full-scale helicopters like the U.S. Army's Chinook, they tend to cap out at that same 1-to-1 payload-to-weight ratio. And that means that there are real limits on what we can lift with a drone and how expensive it is to lift something with a drone. Enter the DARPA Lift Challenge. DARPA is putting up $6.5 million in prize money for anybody who can increase that number from 1-to-1 to 4-to-1. That means that my little 2-pound drone would have to lift an 8-pound payload. That means a 55-pound drone, the maximum for Part 107 operations, would lift a 220-pound payload. And if that sounds impossible to you, wait until you hear that not only do they have to lift the weight, but they have to fly a 5 nautical mile course while carrying the weight and land safely with the ability to you can't just plow it into the ground at the end and say, see, I did it. The reason I'm telling you about this is, number one, it's just cool and you should know that it exists. Number two, it is open to the public. August 6th through 9th in Dayton, Ohio at the Museum of the Air Force. By the way, right next to Flight Fest. If you're going to Flight Fest, you're already at this event. You should totally go check it out. It's open to the public. You can walk right in and there's no charge and you can watch the competitors succeed or potentially spectacularly fail depending on how things go. Probably a little of both. And I'm also telling you about this because I am going to be there. I'm going to be part of the live stream broadcast team helping cover the event. So with all that said, today I sat down to interview the program manager and learn more about the challenge, why they set the rules the way they did, and the philosophy behind it, what they hope to achieve. Let's get into it.
All right. Hey, Josh. Philip Smith here. Call sign is Donna. I'm the program manager for the DARPA Lift Challenge.
By the way, you prefer to go by Donna? Or is it?
Yeah, Donna's it. Yep.
You say call sign Donna.
Yeah, call sign. So I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Reserves right now. When I was active duty, I was a Harrier pilot.
Whoa.
So trained up, did all that, deployed, did a very small amount of combat time back in 2015, and then I've moved since into this RDT&E development world that got me here to DARPA.
Yeah. By the way, I have to say the 14-year-old in me here's Harrier pilot and is very impressed. So Harrier is a very cool aircraft. And right now you work for DARPA. And before we get into talking about the DARPA Lift Challenge, not everybody knows who DARPA is. Would you tell the audience, like, who is DARPA and what do they do?
Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is the full title. It's a mouthful, but it started back in the day after Sputnik was launched, and the United States found that they were surprised by it, right? They didn't know that at the time, Cold War enemy and all this sort of stuff was so advanced. So DARPA was set up with the mission of to create or prevent strategic surprise through technology. So figure out what we can make to have that strategic surprise, or figure out how we can counter it, the enemy's position. So over the years, we're coming up on 70 years here next year. DARPA has done an amazing amount of different things. The most famous has been the internet, right? So we invented the internet. Stealth technology is also one of the highlights over the years. But there's a number of other things that are, some basic science and something that we started and then it grew into something else. So I think Siri, the voice, on your Apple, so that technology was actually started here at DARPA and then went on and became commercialized. So there's a number of different technologies that started here for a military use case or a dual use like the DARPA Lift Challenge. And then over the years with more development, more integration, they've come out to some new technology.
It seems like DARPA really tries to find inflection points where if you just apply a little bit of pressure, you take something that feels almost impossible, and then engineers and everybody comes out of the woodwork and then suddenly, like 2 or 3 years later, it's a thing that is being done, and then it snowballs, and now like we just have GPS. We just have the internet.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. So to just give a little history and credence to the Navy Research Lab, their predominance in the Navy was with GPS, but it did come from a number of institutions, to include DARPA, that worked on those what you said, like an inflection point, right? Like, if we can do X, we know that we can do this one thing, which is what we're going to do, but holy smokes, it's going to open up so many other possibilities, right? And in fact, in order to get a DARPA program approved, it has to have that element. And so a lot of people come to DARPA as a new PM, and I did this as well, and we were very kind of small, narrow-minded, and they were like, look, that's not what we do. We do big, world-changing, life-changing kind of things, right? We have a biological technologies office who does amazing stuff with modern medical sciences and everything, right? And it's like, hey, not only are we doing this because the warfighter needs that medical, advancement, but if we can break this technological marvel and barrier, it's going to spread to everywhere else, right? So that's almost a requirement for a DARPA program, is not to just have a single use case, but to have this blooming or blossoming effect after you break through that technical challenge.
So let's talk about the technical challenge. The DARPA Heavy Lift Challenge. What I'd like you to do is tell us the sort of key requirements of the DARPA Heavy Lift Challenge, because I think, especially my audience who knows a thing or two about drones, I think they're going to be eye-opening when they hear what you're asking these competitors to do.
Yeah. Okay, so overall, we took a look at the vertical lift market, and this was drones and helicopters. So we looked all across. We even went back into history. There was a lot of really amazing innovations in the 50s and 60s with tip jets and some other stuff out there. And we said, man, we kind of plateaued, and we really didn't change the design since Sikorsky flew his first helicopter, right? You can pull up a picture of that, and it looks very similar to current helicopters, just modern. And so what we did is we did an RFI, a request for information, on sam.gov. That's how the government puts out contracts and notices and things like that. And we said, hey, we actually want to lift 70,000 pounds. And that's twice what the largest helicopter currently can do, the largest Western helicopter, which is the CH-53K. And we got a number of responses. And what it showed was there's a lot of untapped innovation in the aviation market, right? When you ask people to think outside of the box, to not just give me another helicopter, but that is 10% better, there was a lot of ideas out there. So that started this concept of, wait, sam.gov has a kind of a limited audience. It's the typical people who work with the government. What happens if we open this up and we hit all of the markets? We push it out through technical societies, aviation societies, university email lists. We make it really public. We put out, press releases. We do interviews with magazines. What else? What other ideas are out there that could solve this problem? So that was the original genesis. Then we had to say, okay, we actually need to do something here, right? And our philosophy was sometimes innovation comes from numbers, right? The number of tries or the number of people. Edison has that phrase, right? 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. So if you get, 200 people trying to do something, maybe one or two will be able to break through. So then we had to look at, okay, the rules. Obviously the FAA. So what we decided to do was bridge this 55-pound rule limit. And so that kind of brought us down. So it's a 55-pound drone. And that is everything included. So that is batteries, fuel. It's not dry weight, it's wet weight. 55 pounds. What that did is it allowed our competitors to start flying at their home locations under normal Part 107 rules, while we pursued a 44807 exemption to add that payload. So when we started going through payloads, we said, okay, the upper limit is 55 pounds on the aircraft. We don't want somebody to build a 1 pound aircraft and lift 4 pounds. That's already been done. And there's scaling laws, right? In the natural and the physical or the technical world, an ant can carry 100 times its weight, but an elephant doesn't, right? And it's just, you don't have that scaling law. So we put a lower limit on the payload of 110 pounds. That was a 2-to-1 ratio. So you at least have to lift 110 pounds, which means you couldn't bring your aircraft weight all the way down to 1 pound or 2 pounds.
So VTOL is a requirement, right?
Correct, yeah. Vertical lift, takeoff and landing.
Okay.
We had to make it so no ground roll at all or anything like that. You have to cleanly take off.
No catapult launcher, nothing like that.
Yeah. So it had to, correct. So it had to be self-sustained. So the original concept here is you take a payload, whether that's a commercial or a military payload, you take it 5 miles away, you drop it off, and then you return. And so that was it.
Okay, so hang on, let me recap. We've got a minimum 110 pound payload. We've got a maximum 55 pound drone, VTOL requirement, and what's the distance?
So that was, originally it was 5 miles. Go somewhere 5 miles, drop off the payload, and then return empty 5 miles. Once we started getting into how are we actually going to run this event, it ended up being this course that we have. So you're going back and forth at 1,100 foot distance. And then just to reduce the overall time so that we could get more people through, it's 4 miles loaded, back and forth, and then you drop the weight off and you do another mile back and forth. It has to take off, on its own. You can't leave behind landing gears or anything like that. You have to take off on its own. You fly 4 miles the entire way. You land. You cannot refuel or add batteries at the turn or the pit stop, whatever you want to say. You can just remove those weights, the payload, and then it has to fly for another mile unloaded. And then you have to do that under 30 minutes. Some caveats here. We knew that this could be done, and it's been done since whatever the 30s or 20s or earlier with hot air balloons. So that is right. So that was taken off the board. You cannot use lighter than air in any way, right? You can't do a combination of them. It has to be a heavier than air aircraft that does this mission.
When I first saw this, I'm going to be honest, I was like, I think that one of the things you're asking is doable with a lot of engineering. This was my first thought. If you tell me I have to have a 55 pound aircraft lift 110 pounds, I'm like, okay, that's hard, but I could do it. If we compare that to current agriculture drones and so forth, you're seeing payload to weight ratios maybe getting close to 1-to-1. So you have a 100-pound drone lifting a 100-pound payload. Not even really. And even if you go up to full-scale aircraft like the Chinook, they're around a 1-to-1. Is that right?
Yeah. So, and of course, with aviation, you have to add a range to it, right? Because you can always swap payload for batteries or payload for fuel. So when you combine these elements, which is what you're getting to, not only is it 55 and 110 pounds at a minimum, we're trying to get to 220, which is that 4-to-1 ratio, but you have to do it over 5 miles, right? Which is crazy.
Right. My thought was what you're asking is, and I the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is exactly what DARPA does. Obviously you're here to speak for DARPA, but you ask for something that is just slightly impossible at first glance, and then eventually somebody goes, wait a minute, I bet I could. And that, I think, is the hope that somebody is going to come out of the woodwork and actually do this. But can we put into perspective for people who maybe don't have all this stuff off the top of their head? How does what you're asking the competitors to do compare to what is currently out there?
Yeah. So we have a great graph, which we can pop up, but in general, your COTS drones right now, if you want them to do a significant distance, and this is where the websites and the stats on different drones all are really confusing. But if you wanted to carry a significant weight over a significant distance and in dynamic weather conditions, right? Because that takes extra power when you have to adjust for wind gusts and things like that, right? So if you want to have those three things, you're about at a 0.2 to 0.3 payload to weight ratio. So, and if let's stick with the Part 107. So the drones that we are seeing in test markets for grocery deliveries and different companies, they are limited by the total all-up weight of 55 pounds. And so that gives them somewhere around like a 45 to 50 pound aircraft that is lifting 5 to 10 pounds of payload. And their distances are only about a mile, maybe 2 or 3 miles. So that's what you're getting with that all-up 55 pound. Now that's different from ours, right? That's payload and aircraft weight because that's a Part 107. So what we're asking people to do is, with that Part 107, build a 10-pound aircraft that lifts 40 pounds of payload, right? So when you have a limit, an upper limit of your total, operating weight, that's what we're asking people to do. Is industry right now, currently, the best payload to weight ratio drones are giving you a 5-pound package delivery. We're asking to go to 40-pound package delivery under that same policy restrictions. And there's analogies on, the larger side as well.
Right. And you're talking about the ratio of payload to weight. So, depending, obviously, for the DARPA Lift challenge, it's going to be a 55-pound drone lifting up to, I guess, 4 to 1 would be 220 pounds. But
Correct.
there's this scale here that happens. And I think it's interesting where you decided to be on the scale, because there's certainly going to be people out there who say, not FPV hobbyists, of course. To us, a 55-pound drone is massive, but there's going to be people out there who say, what's the point of making people build a 55-pound drone that carries 200 pounds? Even if it's something that is sort of an engineering novelty, what does that actually do in the real world? I think there's some interesting answers there. Like, certainly carrying 40-pound payload is not disinteresting compared to a 5-pound payload. But it's interesting that you decided to be sort of at the 55-pound line versus like down at the 10-pound line or higher. Why did that seem like the right place to be?
A couple of reasons, like you said, there's a couple of answers to that. But one is about aviation breakthroughs here. So there's a lot of development and design in that 10-pound world, as we know. With scaling laws, though, there is a really good break point here. When you're trying to get to these significant payload sizes, even though it's 110, 220, that's actually pretty significant for this space. And what it forces people to do is to think outside of the box. Like with a 10-pound, you're obviously going to go with batteries and electric. That's just what you would do, right? Right now at this 55 and 220, you have to grapple with engines and fuel, right? The energy density, as we all know, is so much better. So then you have to look at all your different engines and your configurations, your gearboxes, your RPM ratios, all of that sort of stuff, right? And then with the course, you also have to grapple with winged versus pure, quadcopter style. And so we use an analogy here where the course we set up is kind of like the 800-meter race in track and field. It is right in between on your body types. So a sprinter does not do well at 800 meters, and a marathon runner does not do well at 800 meters. And for this competition, neither traditional design, a fixed-wing design or a quadcopter is favored in either of these scenarios. Now, people are doing both, which is awesome. But they're finding novelties even in those designs that allow them to get such a higher payload to weight ratio or, and find those efficiencies. And that's what we wanted to do, is not favor an already known design, but find an area that is really hard and let's see what happens. Let people grasp and struggle with that problem to find those breakthrough innovations.
I mean, frankly, if all you did was create a 4-to-1 payload to weight ratio in the sub 55 pound, you would already have done a major advancement. Instead of getting like one little bag of groceries from Walmart, I can get my whole grocery delivery on the same drone. So like the potential for it to scale is in some ways like just gravy. But I think the potential's there.
I did a video that we put out a little while ago through our social medias talking about the cost per pound per mile transported, and how that on the commercial side is really what companies do when they're trying to transport goods, right? And so they have trucks, trains, ships, airplanes, and that's normally where it stops on their options. And then they say, okay, this product is so valuable and time, is a value commodity, right? So can I afford an airplane delivery, or do I have to go with, trucks and trains and ships and things like that? So what we realize is that no one really does that for vertical lift, right? So when you go to, for instance, the post office or UPS or FedEx or whatever, they have the option, airmail, ground mail, right?
Right.
There is no option there for vertical lift immediate delivery.
Nobody's using a helicopter to deliver mail, except maybe in Alaska,
Correct.
I suppose.
Yeah, maybe, right?
Maybe. They're certainly not using drones.
No, but it's just economically priced out of those options. And so that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to say, the hypothesis, and this is what we work on as a scientific organization, is the hypothesis is if I so dramatically increase the payload to weight ratio like we are trying to do here, the cost of doing business with a drone and a vertical lift aviation is going to plummet to a point where it now becomes an option for everyday businesses, right? Those are your small and medium businesses, and also for everyday humans. And then when that becomes possible, we don't know what will happen afterwards. And that's the beauty of it, right? So there's some analogies, and I picked larger aircraft to be able to show what a 4-to-1 looks like. So civilian side, I have two aircraft that we've been using in discussions, the K-Max and the Sky Crane. And so both of those are skeletonized civilian aircraft. The K-Max is the smaller one. It's about 6,000 pounds, and it has right around that 1-to-1 ratio of 6,000 pound payload. And then you have the Sky Crane, 24,000 pounds, and about a 24,000 pound payload. So the cost there is, the K-Max is around $8 million, the Sky Crane is around $20 to $30 million. It's hard to kind of, find numbers, and these are just analogies. And then the cost per hour is about $2,000 an hour versus around $7,000 an hour. So what we're saying is, can we get the K-Max at that drastically lower purchase and operating price to lift the same as what a Sky Crane does, right? And so now companies who said, I could never afford a Sky Crane to move my cargo, but I can afford a K-Max, now have the option to be able to do that. And what vertical lift gives you versus a runway-dependent airplane is that distribution, right? So now we can come to houses, you can come to factories, you can go right from a factory to a ship, instead of having to take it through the port, right? There's so many different novel ideas here that if this is possible, if it's economically possible, it might happen.
I heard you say on another call, I think it was really pithy, that Henry Ford could never have predicted the drive-through window. And like once something we could look at the internet, the inventors of the internet could never have predicted the way that streaming would displace physical media. That once something becomes economical in a new way, new uses for it appear, and certainly VTOL Lift has a lot of potential there.
Yeah. And new industries that we never even knew either, right? The drive-through theater or even infrastructure, like every house or almost every house has a driveway or a garage, right? Like we have, because Henry Ford made the automobile, which had been around for 30-some years, because he made it affordable and economical for the everyday man and business, it totally reshaped our world. And now we're seeing it in current day with the reusable rockets, right? Now that we can reduce the cost to get things into space, people are actually thinking about data centers in space, right? That was a silly and stupid idea until the cost was reduced by so much.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people might say it's still silly and stupid.
That's a risky topic. What
It
about?
is, but
what if?
Sorry, to bring it back. If you look at every one of those things, and I've used the personal computer as an example as well of, democratizing computing and how that changed our world. Henry Ford had a lot of detractors, and people said that was stupid. The PC was stupid until it wasn't, right? Until it was invented and until it moved. So we don't know, but it's exciting to be a part of that,
My favorite, when you talk about reusable rockets and sort of what companies like SpaceX are doing with rocketry and making it more economical, is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
My favorite, the first thing that comes to my mind is Starlink, which I have a Starlink terminal. I was once in the middle of nowhere, Texas, far from any connectivity whatsoever, and a dude just popped out a Starlink, plugged in a battery, and suddenly we were connected. And I thought, wow, maybe there's something to this. So this competition is happening, and people can tune in. People can actually, it's open to the public to some degree, right?
Yeah. So, we start on the 2nd of August. So here in another week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is. And so the first couple of days are closed to the public. That's just so we can get runs, we can get, comfortable and familiar. But then Thursday, the 6th, is when we are open to the public. It is also free, so you don't have to do anything. Just come aboard, just show up. And we've co-located with 2 amazing groups and organizations. So if you're an aviation and or a drone fan, this is going to be a combined really amazing event. So we're at the National Museum of the United States Air Force, which if you have not been there, it is amazing. You could spend like 3 days, 4 days going through it. So that's right to the north of us. We're on their grounds, just south of them. And then Flight Fest, if you are familiar with them and the organization called Flight Test, they're also moving. They're normally in Malvern, Ohio, so they're actually coming out to Dayton and will be doing their entire full normal event. So they're going to have their STEM tents, their build tents, they're going to have their aerial combat and everything happening. And that's only a couple of 100 feet away from where the DLC, the DARPA Lift Challenge event is happening. So 6 through 9, come on by. It's going to be an amazing event. Bring your kids and your family.
So August 6th through 9th, Dayton, Ohio. If people want more information, there is a website for the DARPA Lift Challenge. I'm not going to read the URL. I'll put it on screen. I'll put it in the video description below. And in addition to that, there's going to be a multi-day live stream, which I am participating in. I'm going to be one of the broadcasters for the live stream, so I'm very much looking forward to that. And there's going to be a separate website for the sort of live event, which I will also put the URL down below, and people can check those out. And I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm going to go on the record here. I understand probably as an organizer that you can't say who you think's going to win. I'm going to go on the record and say, and we'll see if I turn out to be right, that it feels to me like it has to be some kind of wing-based design or a large single rotor like collective pitch situation, because I don't see how you're going to get the endurance to lift that much weight. But here's the interesting thing. I would love to be wrong, because that's just like my traditional engineering thinking. Somebody's gonna do it with a little, 16 motor multi-rotor. I'm gonna be like, that's impossible. How did they do that?
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see though. I'm gonna put my money down, and we'll see if I turn out to be right or wrong.
We have obviously seen all the different designs through the different stages, and we're just really excited. There are going to be some really, really unique things that are just going to, I think people are going to be like, how does that even fly, right? And I think, knock on wood, these teams are doing amazing things. They're going to come up with some things that people didn't even know you could do, right? And it's going to be awesome.
All right. Well, Donna, thank you so much for spending a little time with us, and I'm looking forward to getting to meet you in person out at the DARPA Lift Challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks for having me on today.